So, can I tell you a secret? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, I have 2 secrets to tell you. One secret is that I had 3 dates and I got married. Is that pretty cool? It's like, how do you read somebody in 3 dates? Oh my God. The way I read my husband was that, beside the fact that he was gorgeous and I loved everything that, he had pressed clothes. Can you imagine a guy coming to pick up a date with, a pressed t-shirt, now everything, t-shirt, dungarees. What an impression. He wore John Lennon glasses, and anyway. It was how he talked about his friends in the car going to the party that absolutely made me clear that this is somebody I had to spend a lifetime with. He talked about how nice they were, and he remembered everything about them and things that they did and wanted to bring me into his world so that I felt connected. And at that time in my life, I really needed to feel connected. Thank you. I don't think I'm going to get to this, I think we'll just talk. So anyway, that's my number 1. Now, the number 2 is that I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 2.5 years ago. Now, if any of you know about pancreas and cancer there, it's not a good sign. And I was told that I would die in 2 weeks, 2 months, or at best 2 years. So I'm here today, thank God. And my 8th book is about how human beings, by their conversations and the quality of their conversations, interact with each other to elevate our immune system. When my doctor started to treat me and got my cancer markers to go down with chemo, he didn't expect it. And he said, "You're different." And I said, "In what way?" He said, "We're going to call you the miracle." And all the doctors that have been treating me are studying what it is that I'm doing that's making me healthy in the face of the worst cancer anyone could ever live with. I had a tumor this big wrapped around the top of my pancreas, which they couldn't even operate on because it was connected to everything in my neck and my brain. And the story's long, but I had a brain tumor 2 months ago, and I'm sitting here after major surgery, and they can't believe it. And I say to the doctors, right here, and I just say to the doctors, I'm studying. I have a chart that shows when my cancer markers go up and down, and I chart the quality of the conversations that I'm having during each one of the times that it goes up and down to see if, in fact, it aligns with the quality of what we say and do with each other every day. And darn it, it does. I have proof now. This is science research I'm doing. I'm not just hypothesizing. So my 8th book will talk about the kind of conversations and samples of them that destroy a person's chance to live long and have healthy lives and happiness with people, and the conversations that are fabulous and we need to understand and cultivate. And this session, the last 2 days, have given you such great insights. I could cut out most of what I'm saying, but I have some pictures that I think I can show you that might add value to what you've already seen. So what you're going to be seeing are going inside of people's heads, because I study conversations from the inside out and from the outside in. So I look at the neuroscience, for example. And I threw away what I was going to say, so had a really long talk with a good friend that spoke earlier about throwing away his papers. And so I actually, I modeled it. I told Tom that I had seen him like 10 years ago, and I knew at the moment he gave me the best advice of my life. Think about it, write it down, prepare, and then throw it away. So I did. So I'm going to tell you things like we have what's called a rostromedial prefrontal cortex, which is a place up here in the brain that has been defined as the like me, not like me part of the brain. So have you ever gone into meetings and parties and things like that, and there's somebody and you just can't stand them? Raise your hand if you've ever experienced something like that. Okay, so now you're like me. I feel really good, because when we find things that we have in common with people, this thing goes off, rostromedial prefrontal cortex, and it enables a new chemistry to appear in your brain, which now enables you to open up the prefrontal cortex and heart connection, which is the most important and strongest connection that human beings have with each other, when their energy fields start to connect, when we start to read each other's minds, and when we feel that we are alike and that we're not going to be hurt by that person. The brain has been trained over billions of years to know that. And I want you to know that that button is there. And if you feel it and you're pushed away, there's a reason. Something's not clicking for you and that person. Or you've had a history. Here's one fact that is fascinating. Every time you meet a person that you have future connections with, there's a place in your brain that has their name on it. And every time you go interact with them again, the brain is a mathematical genius about recording patterns. And that brain will record a pattern of feel good and connection, or something's wrong, and you will even remember down there, it will go unconscious. But and this work has been done by John Barge at Yale University, who studied the unconscious mind and conscious mind, and all these things get stored. And the next time you're going to meet them, let's say I go and I have an appointment with you, and I go back in and check, how did I feel? And I remember something that you did during a meeting. You kind of turned away when I was saying something important, and boy, did I feel hurt. So I wasn't going to make a meeting with you. Now, of course, I love you, and that's not a problem. So. But I will think about that. In my mind, consciously, I will think about that, and I'll prepare myself to notice if it happens again, because if it happens twice, I don't think I can take 3 and I'm out. Does that happen to you when you meet people and search the world around for friends and people that you like? Do you notice those things? Raise your hand if you start to pick up those things. And now, is there anybody in here who would like to learn more about how that works so that you can make yourselves geniuses at this? I hope everybody's hands are raised. Who didn't raise their hand? Okay. Alrighty, so this is what we're going to be talking about, is making the invisible visible, going inside our brains, sharing with you what happens, and giving you some hopeful suggestions to consider moving forward. Now, I'm turning this into a treasure hunt, because as I speak, like I just did, I gave you some tips and things to think about. I'd like you to make sure that you capture what are treasures for you. Something that I say that you say, wow, I didn't know that yet, and I want to bring that back and try it out. We have what we call becoming experimenters in this field, and it's a mentor of an experiment. That if you find something that really works for you today, I'd like you to take it back and play with it for 15 days, 30 days, and keep a journal, because journaling about what you're learning enables you to lock it in as a new pattern. It raises it up to the level of consciousness instead of letting it just kind of float in the background. And it gives you then ammunition to use these tips and to use these tools and to use these insights, again, in a way that will elevate. And this room is full of smart, brilliant, let's say, incredibly wealthy, from what I'm understanding, billionaires. Who's a billionaire in the room? Can I ask that? Is that going to embarrass anybody? Okay, well, there you go. We have one. Okay, 2. We have 2. How about 3? Anybody got a 3 here? And so I'm going to take you inside the brain and see what we can learn together. Now let's see if I can do this. How does my button work? There we go. There we go. Okay. 9 out of 10 conversations fail to hit the mark. They miss the mark. We're finding this out in little ways and subtle ways. And so what I want you to do is begin to see patterns. Conversational patterns that you begin to notice are patterns that set you up for success or prime you for failure. They're there in front of your eyes if you begin to see where and when they show up. So I decided when I was very young, I fell in love with Buckminster Fuller and a number of other people who just broke the rules and created things that other people hadn't seen before. So I decided, with everything I was learning, like in school I was told, by the time you're 19, your brain settles in, it knows what it knows, that's the kind of adult you're going to be, you know, but you're not going to get that much smarter in many ways. And I remember standing up in the class and saying, that's ridiculous, how could that be? I mean, I know a lot of smart people that are older. Come on. And they said, no, well, this is what research shows us. Well, that's completely untrue. Human brains have what's called neurogenesis, where it's growing it all the time if we feed it the right food. One of the things, now remember you're on a treasure hunt, one of the things that helps feed our brain is that we ask questions for which we don't have answers. If you notice your patterns, many times we ask questions like, you'd really like to do that, wouldn't you? It's really good for your health, it's good for this, it's good for that. that's not a question that opens up the brain. So if you start to monitor your questions, you will find whether you're sitting on the side of neurogenesis. And more people will live to be over 100. So it's coming forward, whether we choose to do it or not. Conversational intelligence, what is that? Now, since I can't read that, I might need somebody to help me. Is there anybody in here who has a loud voice who can see what's up there? How about if we do it in unison? How about if everybody reads together what it says about conversational intelligence? I'm going to count to 3, and then I'd like to do, so it sounds like one voice in the room. Are you ready? No, I didn't hear anything. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Conversational intelligence is the hardwired and learnable ability to connect, navigate, and grow with others. A necessity in building healthier and more resilient organizations in the face of change. Conversational intelligence begins with elevating the level of trust that you create with others and ends with the quality of interactions and conversations that result.
How did you do? Give yourself a hand. I usually need to do more coaching to get that to happen. So I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of amazing leaders who've taught me things that I never knew before. One of them was Angela Arnst, who became the CEO of Burberry. I actually got to coach her for 22 years. She's now at Apple, making changes in Apple, for example, building community hubs where people can go into Apple and have conversations about what they want to learn and learn from each other, and then given tools to make those beautiful things happen. What you're going to see are the 5 most important conversational essentials that evolved as I was working with these great leaders like Angela. I'd like you to note that each one of them, if you introduce or graft them into your language, into your conversations, are absolutely world-changing. And I can't emphasize it enough. It seems so simple. Well, first of all, being open to influence. Because many times we go into conversations without being open to influence. We already have our ideas set and we want to tell somebody, and we might fall into the tell, sell, yell pattern. Remember, this is a treasure hunt. Tell, yell, sell pattern, or addicted to being right so easily. These are the tools, conversational tools that are so simple you can teach them to young children. They actually do them automatically. So being open to influence, prime for trust, ask questions for which you don't have answers, listen to connect, and I want to add this, not judge or reject. If you start to monitor your own brain, you will find that very often you listen, but you're listening and saying in your head, boy, that was stupid. I can't wait to tell them what the right answer is. From those laughs, I know you've been there, so we all have. Sustained conversational agility, being able to reframe, refocus, and redirect. And the last one, which didn't show, we have to go back. The last one is called double clicking, and I don't know how to get double click on this to get double clicking to show up. Is it there? Oh, it is there, right. It used to be on the upper level. That's fantastic. Okay, it is there. I taught double clicking to a CEO and the top 200 people in a Fortune 40 company, and they loved the terms. All I had to do is give them, we have what we call a Wikipedia. Like a Wikipedia, we've created hundreds and hundreds of new terms that when we graft them in a company, those new terms have the power to shift a culture. So this CEO who had trouble in big meetings going with the flow so he could get everybody speaking up, he didn't know how to do that. So what he did is he started to use the Conversational Essentials, and he'd say things like, okay, I feel that this room needs to move to another level, which is what we're going to focus on today with you. You're going to do an exercise. We need to get to level 3, which is where we trust each other, we're open, we listen to connect, we double click. And he said, so let's go into level 3 and remember to bring our double clicking tool with us to the meeting. He did this, and out of the meeting with 149 people, which were not his direct reports, but below, they ended up with 25 of the most powerful ideas that reinvented their business. So double clicking, let me give you a personal example. I got a call after I did what I call immersions to introduce people to my work. And I got a call from a woman from Australia, and she said, I listened to you and I have a problem with my daughter and I had a feeling that you could help. And I said, sure, let's talk about it. What's going on? I said, tell me something about yourself first. and I learned that she was a Harvard graduate. She was a lawyer. I could hear her energy, which is what we pick up and feel about people, was so strong that I sometimes felt I couldn't get a word in. So then I said, well, what's going on with your daughter? And she said, my daughter, we had to move to a farm. I was told that my daughter was autistic, that she'd never be able to have healthy conversations with kids in school, and she might need tutoring. And we got horses and sheep. And I said, have you tried some things? And she said, just what the doctors have told us. She said, but I feel intuitively that you could help me. And I said, I'm going to give you 3 things to do. When you interact with your daughter, I want you to be open to influence. I want you to feel that what she says might have a chance of impacting you and changing you in some way, because we feel each other's energies when we do that. So clear our mind and be open for influence. I said, that means you're creating a space or a field, an electronic field around you and that person that has the ability to impact and evolve your relationship with her. I said, listen to connect and ask questions for which you don't have answers, and call me tomorrow after you've had the conversation. That was 2.5 years ago. This is where her daughter is today. First of all, the mother used those to create a new energy field with her child and a new relationship. She told me that it was the best conversation she'd ever had with her daughter. I flew out to see her in Australia a year ago to learn that they moved away from the farm. Her daughter was able to stand in front of an audience like this of 50 to 100 adults and make them laugh hysterically. Where did that come from? It was a child who was told that she may not fit into public school. Where did that come from? Her mother continued to keep that force, that electrical force around her child, to bring her out of where she was. It turned out that her daughter was so brilliant that she had trouble speaking to the ideas that were coming to her. She had gut instincts that she didn't understand because people said, you have to train this part of the brain, the neocortex, the part that holds knowledge. Well, her knowledge was coming from inside, and there wasn't a space to talk to people about energy and the things that she was feeling and seeing. See her today. She runs programs with the UN for children. In school, she's one of the top students, interacting with everybody. All the mother did was change the electrical field of conversation with her daughter, and that child completely transformed in 3 years to someone that they never knew was inside. I'd like you to write down, please, a website to go to on YouTube where you will see a young boy named Jacob Barnett, who was also told that he would never interact. The mother said that he was institutionalizable only. Jacob Barnett, on YouTube, look him up, and you'll see the story. You'll see him standing on a stage at TEDx Teen, addressing everybody with great confidence, and he'll tell you a little bit of his story. He had such big ideas, again, in his head that he couldn't explain them. And people needed to give him a completely different type of exercise. We have push and pull energy inside, and nobody was allowing the push and pull pattern that activates our brain to be healthy in Jacob or in this little girl. So when you think about what exchange looks like and you become a pattern seeker, you'll start to notice the exchange. What I'd like you to do as an exercise, please, to turn to somebody next to you, and I'd like you to begin to activate this type of energy through something very simple that you could do anywhere. So I'd like you to turn to someone. I'd like you to put out your hand and shake their hand, but don't just shake it and pull it away. I'd like you to look at, now there's one more step. 2 more steps. Hey guys, you are fast. Hey, hold on. You have to complete the whole cycle. Don't want you to miss the punchline. Okay, shake hands, look in their eyes. There's research that as you look in people's eyes, you're activating oxytocin, which activates bonding and ability to speak up. Autistic children who weren't able to connect, they sprayed oxytocin in their nose, and they were able to move into school situations. Imagine you could carry this stuff around, you're a little frightened about going into a meeting, take a little sniff, and bingo. I think it's on the market, it's called oxytocin, right? But the last thing I want you to do, number 3, handshake, look in their eyes, and then I'd like you to share something that you've never shared with anyone before. Ready? Get set, go. If you learned something from that exercise, I want to take a second and write it down quickly so you can remember what you want to do when you go back home. This is one of the most easily used exercises that, because it's part of our rituals in everyday life. I taught this to a woman who was a director in a company. They said, will you work with a director? Because I usually work with people above that. And I said, yes, what's going on? And they said, we think she has potential, but we're not quite sure. Something's missing when she engages with people. And so I watched her, I studied her. Alessa was incredible. And I said, I think you're a little bit of an introvert, enough that it's getting in the way that when you get into meetings with really strong-minded people, like all of you are, and she sat at one of your tables, now she's learned, but she might before have had an inability to join the energy of the team. And so I told her what I just told you, and she would go to the meetings now and they were all men, by the way, she was the only woman in the meetings, and she did the handshake, the eye contact, and she remembered so many things. So she would say something about the people that she remembered. How was your daughter? You said she was doing this or doing that. And it incredibly elevated her oxytocin. When she got into the meeting and she started to hear the conversation building, the circle building, before she couldn't see when to get in. With oxytocin, it slows down time and it enables you to enter conversations in a completely different way. So as a result, she started to add her ideas sooner. As a result of that, she became known as the ideal woman, and this is what followed. When she jumped her boss and became the person who was the leader over her boss came to me and said, didn't we do a great job with Alessa? He was so happy. Then she jumped over and she was the first woman in this company to be brought into the CEO's top 10. The first woman, from one exercise that she used to bring herself to a higher level internally of the right type of chemistry that enables conversation to be healthy. So whenever you find yourself stepping back, please use this ritual and see what it does. I'm open for sharing stories. So what this is all about is to get to the next level of greatness. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to be bad or do horrible things to people. We would look at ourselves and say, what's next? So to get to the next level of greatness depends on the quality of our culture, which depends on the quality of relationships, which depends on the quality of conversations. Everything happens through conversation. Everything happens through conversation. When I started out, I was focusing on culture. Everybody says, how do we change our culture? The culture starts with conversations. So I'd like you to do this exercise. Actually, we did one like this already, but let's do a real quick one. How can you do this together and sound like one voice? Because companies that find a common voice are what changes the world. So very quickly step into what you've learned so far. And can you read this? I'm going to do a countdown, 1, 2, 3, and I'd like everyone to please read this together. We just elevated the challenge a little bit. Are you ready? Yes? Louder. Are you ready? Yes. Okay. Start. 1, 2, 3. Time out, time out. I'd like you to try sinking hearts before you do this exercise. Okay? Just focus, and we'll do a countdown again. 1, 2, 3. Give yourself a big hand. So what I heard you do at the end is really, really important takeaway. There was a moment where the team started to kind of split into two parts. Did you hear that a little bit towards the end? And then somehow you connected to pull it together and you ended together. Human beings have that capacity if we listen and observe and watch how we connect, get back in sync when we lose it. And we're going to have, hopefully, how much time do I have left? What does that mean? 25 minutes, great. Okay, I think we're going to have time for you to do some of those. These are pictures now. These are videos that I had created for me to show why CIQ, conversational intelligence, is so important, and it has to do with how we perceive reality. So there are reality gaps that appear everywhere when we're in conversation with people because we can't see everything at once and hear everything at once, so we pick a place of focus. Some people focus on the leaves of the tree and the stems and little things because they want to get into the details, and other people focus on something much bigger, big picture thinking. And so they take in and label their area of focus. And when people get together and we talk, sometimes we're speaking from those different levels, and the conversation is filled with reality gaps. And we kind of can't believe that the other person didn't get it or didn't see it. And sometimes we can get angry and upset and start to push and have our point of view very vocal. That's part of everyday life everywhere in the world, no matter what country that I visited, Dubai and China and South America and South Africa, whatever it was, we all have this happening in our brain. And we have to acknowledge it so that we're easier on each other and stop and say, help me understand. I heard something. This is double clicking, by the way. I'm hearing 2 or 3 things in what you're saying. Let's talk a little bit more so I understand, rather than going into the conversation saying, that's absolutely stupid. I can't believe you're thinking that. What idiot would think? We think that in our, how many of you have ever thought that in your head? Come on, let's be honest. Let's be transparent. We do. And then all of a sudden, we are now in a different relationship with that person. So conversation and relationship, how do they interact with each other? This is what happens when 2 people are talking and they're not really connecting. It's the like me, not like me part that isn't working. So let's see what their brains look like. In a moment of contact, this couple, these 2 people are starting to feel a distrust of the other person. The rostromedial prefrontal cortex is flying off saying something like, they're not like you and they might get you, which is what we have stored in our history of genes. But there's also something that's pulling at that person. They want to share, they want to talk, they want to interact. We have a TPJ, which one of the other presenters mentioned, temporoparietal junction, which is about sharing and about connecting. And today, I was looking at one of the films that I created with a neuroscientist, and she was talking about that part of our brain, the TPJ, when we're sharing, we're sitting here doing our emails and talking to people, we're sharing, and that makes us feel connected to other people. That's one of the social spots in the brain. And if we can begin to activate sharing instead of arguing and fighting or sending energies of dislike or distrust, all of a sudden, something else is going to happen to the brain. Right here, we could fall into the tell, sell, yell syndrome. We could be addicted to being right. And so listen to connect, not judge or reject. That one CIQ essential in the moment we're talking about, in 0.07 seconds, can absolutely change a conversation. It's much easier than we realize if we know how to use these brain-exciting tools. To the brain, this is exciting. So let's see what we can learn about this. I've created a dashboard to make the invisible visible. There are ways to partner, and there are ways to be protective. Protective means your brain closes down. The back of your brain, which I'm going to show you in a minute, the lower part of the brain, gets activated. Here we go. And cortisol is spewed, and it closes down the prefrontal cortex, which is this part of the brain. The prefrontal cortex and heart is what we want to activate when we put our arms around people or make them feel included, not excluded. It only took me 35 years to build this. So, it's a pretty good one to hang out with. What this one tells us is that the protective behaviors of the fight, flight, freeze, and appease, where we say yes, 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 but we don't really mean it. But look what you get when you go over to the other side. I'd love you to write this down. This is something that gives you wisdom. You are able to be wise and fit to work with the changes that take place in the world around us. Everybody get your cameras out. Everybody take a picture. Everybody talk about this with everybody that you know. So it gives us wisdom. It gives us, what's the second word? Let's hear them out loud. What's the second word? Innovation, strategy, empathy. And there's a new thing that we've learned about compassion. Compassion is a step up from empathy. When we have empathy and we say, I feel your pain, sometimes that means that my body actually goes into the actual pain that I'm hearing you express. And now we both feel pain. However, we've learned that the word compassion, when we say, how can I support you in this? Is there anything I can do? We're reaching out and saying, you're okay, and I want to help you in some way, and I want to be with you and support you. Those are insights. They're not tricks, although they may be tricks for the brain, but it opens up the oxytocin flow. It enables you to move through trust, which I'll show you in a second. It gives you foresight, insight, and trust. Any questions about this? Anything that you need to know that you haven't already understood so far from this particular piece? When I went into a company called New Wave Entertainment, in fact, I'm going to show I think I have their story coming up in a sec. Let me see where that goes. Let me finish this part, and then I'll show you New Wave about how this changed the whole company in such an amazing way. What is behind the scenes is there are things that open the brain that help you create that oxytocin flow, help you create co-creation. I'm not talking about collaboration. Collaboration in the dictionary, and I wrote a dictionary for Random House, and I had to put 3,500 new business terms in it, so I started to really look at the origin of words and how words contain worlds. So when we hear collaboration, collaboration is cohorting with the enemy. And I wanted a word that was new and different, that people didn't use yet. And so I talked about co-creation. And so on the dashboard, you see co-creation on the right side. Here's a trick. If you pick up a new word, if you create it with people in your team, and your team feels ownership of that new word, your brain is actually making new networks that has a space in the networks that's holding a space for you to build the definition with your team of a new word that you can use, that everybody's connected to, and if you use it, will transform your organization, like talking about co-creation, or talking about double-clicking, or talking about things that really work. So we start out by being transparent, which sends a message to the brain. It opens it up and says, I'm willing to share. Then we focus on relationship before task and get to know people a little bit, become friendly with them, because that warms up the brain again, sends more oxytocin, lowers the cortisol in the lower part of the brain. And this is one of the most important ones. How many of you have been taught that, that when you show understanding for people, you play back what they said to make sure that you understood what it meant? Have you been given that definition for what understanding is? I'm changing it now, please, for you. Understanding means standing under someone's reality. That means you spend more time pulling and asking questions, more time understanding where they come from. All of a sudden, that shifts, enable you, when you get together, to do work in teams to create shared success. Otherwise, you're going to put things up on the wall, you'll vote on them. The best idea when you voted is the one you're going to pick. That's old. The new is going into level 3 conversations, which I'm going to have you do today, and begin to share things in ways you've never shared before, listen in ways you've never listened before. And then testing assumptions to see if you're right and you're not, being transparent enough to start the circle again and share that you didn't understand, or you need to double click, or something that will enable that energy flow to continue. We've worked with amazing companies that were much smaller, but let me show you what happens when you do that, and then I think I'm going to do the case study. Okay, this is what happens when your brain starts to connect. It's an energetic field that begins to pick up where someone is coming from, as they say, and you begin to get into that channel, and you start to find your brain has things in common. We have what are called mirror neurons that are located in the brain. And as those mirror neurons you are interacting, those are opened up, turned on, and all of a sudden, your ability to understand where everybody comes from is very different. It means the like me, not like me, the rostral prefrontal cortex is very happy. It means sharing takes place, transparency takes place, and oxytocin goes up. Quite an amazing thing, so we'll connect, bond, and trust. Even if you work with a team where you're having trouble, when you begin to use some of the conversational essentials, like reframe, and you say, this has been a challenging but fascinating conversation we've had in our team. What I'd like to do is reframe it, because some of the ideas that start to bubble up might be better to start over here and actually explore something we've never talked about before. How many people are game in doing that? How many people in this room are game in looking at things in new ways? Is that part of how your brain works? Right. So just reframe, refocus, or redirect gives people a chance to get out of a sticked conversation that's not working, and give them a chance to create a new space where new ideas can flow, and your body chemistry shifts with that direction. Words were created to help us change worlds. Words were created to communicate and move us and interact in different ways than we've never ever interacted before. So if you look at the left side, the word reality appears, but when we're in distrust, we see the world, same head, but see the world by revealing less, expecting more. Please take pictures of this. I welcome you. We're on the right side when we're trusting people. That opens up the prefrontal cortex and heart connection. We expect less, we over-deliver. We assume the best. We look with an open heart, interpret with facts, tell the truth, and say yes to confronting the truth with others. Two different mindsets looking at the same world. On one side, we have the small view, and we only look around to protect ourselves. And on the other side, we have access to all the capacities that are hardwired into our brain. When people say we only use 10%, we use 10% when we're afraid. We can use 100% when we trust. So, how do we prime, and why do we prime? We prime the brain, like I suggested, to think about a person that you're going to meet. Put some priming in your brain about, ooh, this is going to be a new and exciting adventure. I'm going to have something that happens that's never happened before. By priming, it changes the brain. Here's a story from a person that was going to become a CEO in a team in the world, one of the world's largest publishing companies. I was asked to come in because people were afraid of him, and they couldn't have a fearful leader or one that they feared as their head. And so I had to figure out what was going on, and I started to ask him questions and map patterns. And the people that were working for him would tell me, they'd walk down the hall, his head would be down. Now, he was a high introvert, so he would think a lot. And when he was thinking, he didn't always look at people, but when he did look at them, he looked at them with whatever was in his head. That idea was what people saw. They saw either he was happy because he knew they were going to make money that month, or he was angry at someone. And so what happened is that he was sending signals, and now I can't get to my next. I need my team in the back to bring up the slide that's next. It's an animated slide, and my clicker isn't picking it up. So can someone in the back? There you go. Thank you. This is, please take a picture of this. This is amazingly important. In 0.707 seconds, impressions are made. 0.07 seconds, trust is lost. Oops. No, they didn't get the picture yet. Go back or go forward. Oh no, now try it again. Now click again. No. Hey, you guys. No, that's too important too, but do one more click. We had them up there. Where did they go? Up here. Oh, I guess I don't have that kind of magic yet. Impressions are made. We get a sense, yeah, there you go. Voice is lost. You can be in a room ready to talk and you lose your voice in 0.07 seconds. Look at the other side. In 0.1 seconds. What are made? Say it out loud. What are made? Say it loud. Impressions. Okay, keep going. What happens in the next one? For everybody to hear. Say it out loud. You'll remember it better. Yep, keep going. And the last one, in 12 to 18 seconds, it's now down to 6 seconds. You lose, like I've been watching you kind of check out and then check back in and check out and check back in and talk to somebody else. You have to do that because your brain needs to breathe. But when that happens, note that you may be missing the content, the reality that somebody else is sharing with you. And you're going to make up stuff anyway about what was missing. That's how the brain works. We have to be kind to each other, and we've heard that in this conference. We have to listen in different ways because our brain needs to be able to tune back in. I can lose you, but I want to tune back in. These are things you can also please take a picture of this. This is what you practice. You learn. The brain doesn't like stop and start. The brain likes down-regulating and up-regulating. Down-regulating means do less of. Up-regulating means do more of. And so when you're being coached, and your coach tells you to stop, and excuse me if you use this strategy or have used it, one way that will help that work and stay better is to start out with, okay, what are you doing that you think it might be you're talking about excluding, making people feel excluded in the company, like the leader that turns away when you're saying something, or like crossing your arms when you're listening to someone. What can you do less of that might be sending signals that you're excluding people, because the biggest fear in the world is to be excluded. We're hardwired that way. Judging people, limiting the scope of their work, giving them less, makes them feel small, makes them feel fearful of you that you're not you don't have their best interest in mind. Withholding, knowing too much, dictating. You may find yourself appearing up on the left side. I'm doing a project now with Delaware, with the government, and with 300,000 people in Delaware, in Wilmington, Delaware. And they sit, when they do webinars, with this chart in front of themselves as they're talking, the leaders do, noting what they were going to say and to notice if they were doing any of the things on the left which might close down the team's ability to contribute, which we just heard in the last presentation. We have that to contribute. How do we set the stage? And so they would see if they were on the left and then move over to the right and change in the moment their conversations and how they structure it in order to ensure that they're moving positive energy into the field of their people's potential. So upregulate and downregulate. So New Wave was this company that I worked with out in Hollywood. They were $15 million when I started to work with them. In 3 years, this company grew to a $250 million company in 3 years. They had to buy a new building. They were working with Disney. They were a spin-off of Disney, and they were doing trailers and things for movies. What happened is that it turned out that inside that company there were potential for 7 divisions. This company is now company owned by the employees. I don't know, has anybody ever done work with them or know who they are or seen them on TV? I thought I saw hand raised before. Thank you. They are amazing and functioning in healthy ways. They started to institute conversational intelligence in a way that would open up the space for conversations, and lo and behold, they had to buy this huge building because the space grew so much for the talent of the people in the room. They now work with every single major production company, and they are amazing. CIQ can become hardwired into everyday life, and that's what they're doing in their company. So how do we make the invisible visible? First of all, we have to look at our conversations as those that will actually open us up or close us down, and have that in our mind and realize that conversational cocktails are what we do every day when we're in our meetings with people or sharing whatever we want to do with people. They are cocktails that literally can change the brain of people around you. So think about what you might be saying to activate some reaction in people that makes them feel small or limited, or that you're dictating and you're not really caring about them. Think about what you can say to these people to activate the kind of chemistry that's going to make them smart and bring new things to your company. The things, again, we saw in all of the presentations. How do you make somebody smart? You change the cocktails. Something else that we have to do is think about, you create the inner space. Prime yourself to be open to influence. Prime yourself to think about the skills that can help you move a conversation in the moment into becoming an agile conversation. Create the outer space. So I worked with Coach, the pocketbook company, the handbag company that has grown so much to billions. And when they were first starting out, they would try to sell the idea that they were going to be a designer company, but nobody believed that a company that just made brown handbags was going to be able to be a designer company. And they wouldn't give them space in stores like Bloomingdale's and Macy's and so forth. So we analyzed the conversations that they were having when they went to meetings with these people. And we discovered that you often have long tables like this, and at one head used to be a Macy's person and the other head used to be a Coach person. And what does it mean in the physical space when two people sit at the heads of the table? Anybody? Louder? Adversarial. They're both bosses. Instinctively, the brain goes to, I have to take charge and make sure my point is made. So we analyzed the space and found they were doing things that were counterproductive. We had them Coach send out an agenda beforehand so there was no surprises, so they would be trusted. And we started to set up a conversation, phone call before they came in to sit and talk to the buyers. They sat in the middle, next to each other, writing down notes about things that the other person was saying so that they'd have a better conversation. And what happened? Lo and behold, every meeting they had was a success. And Coach went from a very small company to a multi-billion-dollar company. So think about the spaces that you create inside of yourself. Prime yourself to be open and receive another person. And think about all the good things that could happen. And get excited because they will feel that energy. Create the external space so that you don't set up adversarial conversations without even realizing it. Make the invisible visible. So what we've learned is that many conversations fall into 3 categories. In fact, that is the primary set of categories. One is transactional. It's telling and asking. The other is positional, which is where you have a point of view and you're advocating and inquiring, again, with a lot of push strategy and energy in it. If you want to change your companies, move into transformational level 3, co-creating conversations, where you take the treasured ideas that you heard today and bring them into the rooms and set the stage and find out what people want to take away or what they can do to change their spaces internally and externally to have a phenomenal conversation. Use these and you will create what we call share and discover mindset. The TPJ, which is for sharing, and the rostromedial prefrontal cortex will instantly shift on. It's as though it's a different way to start the cars, the energy, the power, the force that's in your organization. So this looks like this. So we move in level 1 to tell and ask. That's when we're connecting with people. When we start to navigate, we have to know their point of view. So we often get positional so people know what our ideas are and we can discuss those ideas and strategies. It's normal and healthy. But we can also sometimes get into advocating and pushing and getting locked into the push behavior. And the last one is share and discover. So listen to discover what we don't know. Listen to connect. Prime yourself before you go into those meetings, even if they're going to be challenging, and especially if they're challenging, to help create a safe space where people can be trusted and can trust each other, and everything else will change. So take a minute and talk with the people that we have left. We have 4 minutes about something that you learned and hope that you can bring back home so that we can close the loop and your mind begins to elevate those things from the unconscious, which we know in our gut and in our heart is true about what human beings need. Take the time to sit with. Your books have this in them already, so you'll have it to take back in addition to your pictures. Your books have this in the page. Take a minute to write down something that you promise yourself to do differently or share with someone and learn from them what they are choosing to do that will make every change in the world possible. Take a second, talk to your partners. I'd like you to wrap up your conversation. I just found out that we have about 7 minutes for questions. If people have questions to ask, I'd love to hear them. So you're going to have a chance to go to lunch and talk with each other again about more things. So I'm going to count down from 5 and ask you to slow down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. I'd like to see if there are any questions. If anybody has questions, please raise your hand. I'd love to answer them. Yes?
Is there any research that suggests looking at a particular eye when you're conversing with someone has a better effect than the other eye?
That's a great question. And I'm going to look up research, and if you give me your card, I'm going to send it to you. I'm sure that there must be something like that. What made you say that? I'm double-clicking.
Something I've been fascinated about.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yes, it does. Is there any research that you know about that tells us which is the better eye to look at when you're looking at people's eyes? Does anybody know that? I don't know, but I found out from my doctor about a year ago that I was supposed to be left-handed. And he found that up. I said, how do you know that? He said, I could see it in your eyes. So maybe I should call that doctor and find out. Good question. Another good question, please, any kind of question.
So Judith, we've got questions up here. I'll ask them to you. So
Okay.
how do you use CIQ in virtual meetings? Many meetings where I don't ever see the person I'm talking to.
Exactly. So I actually did research with a company that presented virtual meeting options for people. And the first thing is to start out by saying, let's see, we don't see each other. So let's see if we can make visible our rules of engagement about how we want to be with each other. Because you know we always go on our phones. So I'd like everybody to contribute, and if it's 1,000 people, it's going to be hard. But if you get, certain people to choose beforehand, that you choose beforehand, and say, what are the rules? So we'd like to not use our phones, put them away, turn them off, give them to somebody else if we have to. And other rules of engagement that make it feel warm, and make us feel like we're on each other's side, and then we don't have to have questions and doubt. And the chart that I showed you about downregulate and upregulate, you can share that with the team and say we want to, if we notice anything is happening in our group, let's see if we can help downregulate, because the more the oxytocin is flowing, the better, I can guarantee you this, the better your ideas will be. They will be far-reaching. And how many of you have had this experience where you're with people and you're thinking about things, and all of a sudden an idea pops through your head like a bird flying across your brain, and you say, oh, that is such a good idea, I'm going to remember that one. How many of you have kind of had that experience where and I'll remember it and you don't write it down? And then how many of you have been able to find it again? It happens. Every once in a while we get a peek into the new things that our brain is thinking about or that could happen. I did this with NASA. A woman I was talking to, I could see in her eyes that something happened, and one of those ideas flew by. So notice when you get those eye movements, something is happening in someone's brain. And I said, what did you see? And she said, I have to write it down. I guess she got it. I have to write it down and then I'll tell you. That one idea for her, she said, changed her whole life. I spoke to her at the end of the day. She made a connection of everything that she had learned about her daughter who was having some challenges and her connection to her history. And it was like some angel just popped in and said, this is what it's all about. And she caught it. And it became a life-changing thing for both she and her daughter. So these are the kind of things that can help us as leaders when those brilliant ideas, how about waking up in the middle of the night and I have a pad that I write on. I take journals everywhere, just in case those ideas pop up. They are the keys to the future. And somehow we're given them. I don't know how we are given them, except that our brain is comfortable enough to process this part and this part with the universe.
Judith,
No, yeah.
so the next one. Terry says, wishing you continued good health. And can you please explain the
Thank you.
double clicking again?
Double clicking says it's not, we've been taught when we're talking to others that you ask why, and then you ask why again, and then you ask why again. That's, first of all, why is a threatening word, and what you're doing is activating cortisol instead of oxytocin. So I'd like you to consider not using that word unless you've set the context for why to be comfortable. But then asking questions, as you listen to people, say, I'm wondering, and you have an idea, I think there might be something over here that you're talking about. I'd love you to talk more about this or explain something. So you're asking them to open up the picture, because we have mind maps for every idea that we have. We have patterns in our brain that hold those ideas, and they're collected in what are called hubs now. And so people have the hubs in their heads, they're not visible. So if you ask questions that broaden their ability to share with you some of the pictures that are in their head, you get a whole picture, and again, the conversation becomes deeper, richer, and more meaningful. That was a great question.
So the next one, and how can one best expand the mind's capacity? Jobs, Musk, Graham, Hancock, and other prolific geniuses have used psychedelics, which, by the way, is Mile High Denver, reminds me of our next summit. But what's your impression of psychedelics and the use?
My impression of what?
Psychedelics, the use of...
The use of psychedelics, I don't know, because I've only tried them twice. And I can say that the second time I ended up getting a job that was wonderful because I took it the night before, but it's freaky. There's got to be a healthy way to use them, because I mean, people are dying from too much and overdose because it's so addictive. And I'm afraid that we have to do the right things for humanity around them.
So how do you speed up the process to get to co-creational conversations when people are not open?
Is if you're comfortable enough to say things, the feeling in the room is that people are not really open to what we're going to be doing today, and I'd love to see if there's a way that we can do that. How do we set the stage for us to be open, even though we have challenges and issues and fears and things like that, and we're all human? How do we set that stage to make it comfortable? We put a context of maybe a new meaning inside the word open or comfortable or whatever the word is that we're using, with a new definition, hopefully to activate the person's willingness to go a step further with us and try to become more open with you. Some people are really hard. The word is A, it begins with A. and they don't want to do it, and maybe they don't want to be influenced, they don't like your something. Say, can we go out for lunch? Sometimes when you go out for lunch, and there's great research by John Barge, that if you drink warm coffee with people that have objections with you, or even friends, It actually activates the warm networks in the brain, and it makes it easy, like oxytocin, to spur the oxytocin. If you go with cold drinks, it activates the cold part of the brain, and it makes it harder for you to have breakthroughs with them. So think about that as one of the activators. Very simple and very truthfully works.
Wow, that created a buzz.
Cool.
Judith, I know we ask all the speakers, but are we going to be able to get a copy of the presentation that we can load up to download, or is it all? It's all in the book, or?
It's all in the book and more. I mean, there's so many examples of things that you can be doing to activate. The book reinforces what's in the slides. And would you like to raise your hand if you think you might want to have the slides to look at?
Yeah, I think they
again.
Do. All right.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on Enneagram typing as it relates to better relationships and conversations?
I think there are, 9 different Enneagrams? Is that right? Something like that. And yeah. There are a lot of things, like I've studied the Myers-Briggs and DISC and all sorts of tools that put people in categories. There's a good side and there's a downside. The good side is we get to know somebody and give them a name that is good, because most of the names and the lists are healthy ways of talking about people's attributes and what they're best at. It also helps us understand why we get pissed off at certain people, because too much of something that is opposite us makes us angry. However, if we get stuck with the labels and don't go below where we learn to see patterns, not label them, that's labeling patterns, but see the patterns and understand what to do with people that are different than we are, or how to accelerate the conversation in a room, that's where things matter. Labels can often turn sour on us if we say, yeah, jokingly, that person's a blah, blah, blah. They're a thinker, and I'm an intuitor, and of course I'm not going to get along with them. That language comes from labels that go bad, that go sour. So I just be cautious.
A couple of more. You indicated a bit about how we stored judgments on our previous interactions.
Yep.
And how they made us feel. So how hard are these to change? Is the first impression truly difficult to overcome?
Yeah. If you have like 9 to 1, or 100 to 1, 1 good and 100 bad, I think you're going to have a lot more difficulty having people believe that you are changing. But I coached a guy named Corey in a very big company that's written up in HBR for producing a company every year and a half. Brilliant, brilliant. He was one of the nastiest people in the world and didn't listen to people and blah, blah, blah. And so every time people interacted, they got another, don't talk to that guy again. What happened is that I helped him connect, and this is another tip, another clue for how you can move people in ways you never expected. We have to learn how to connect. There's a part of our brain that is our intention, and then there's a part of our brain that's our impact. When people who are not really nice to you and you want to change as a leader and help them because you think they have a lot of potential, you want to help them see the connection between what they intend to do and the impact. And this guy, Corey, was beating up on people, judging people, drinking, making them feel bad, but he brought in a lot of money to the company, so they kept him really long. And in my first coaching session with him, it took me 19 minutes, 26 seconds to have a conversation. And I came in and said, asked questions somewhere around the 12th second or 12th minute, excuse me. And I said, Corey, I have to ask you a question. And he didn't hear me. Corey, I have to ask you a question. And for 5 times I noted what time I asked him a question and got louder and tried to interrupt him. He was so locked into his own behavior, there was no chance. However, he heard it the last time, and I said to him, this is what we need to work on. You need to see the impact you're having on others. If you want to be a great leader, we know you have such potential. We hired you because you were brilliant and you added value, but the impact is negative, and we can't have that in our company. People want you to leave. So he signed up at that moment to be coached. 3 weeks later, he was sitting in a meeting, and just understanding the intention and the impact link. We have to look at impact. We want it to be this, but look what's happening. And all of a sudden, he sat in a room and he saw somebody behaving like he did, and he got sick in his stomach, and he went out of the meeting, and he called me up, and he described what just happened. And I said, what happened to you, Corey? And he said, I saw myself really for the first time. And thank you. And now he calls it, thank you for saving my life. So there are a lot of things that we can do that seem simple that can truly change our brain and the brain chemistry in the moment. And I hope so far, I know we're going to be closing down in a second, and I hope so far that you found something. Raise your hand if you found at least one thing that you can take back to share with your team. Awesome. And sometimes you only need one, to make a change of a lifetime.
But Judith, I want to go back.
Sure.
So that was a coaching of him, but there was a bunch of people that had a negative impression about him.
Thank you.
So
how did we do that?
How do you change that?
Well, this is what we did, and I will do it all the time. I let the team know. I went to a meeting with them and let the team know that Corey and I were working on coaching and that he was actually having some insights that were pretty significant. But I know that you had such a long-term experience with him that wasn't good, so I was honest with them. I said, I'd like to bring Corey into the meeting if you would give me permission, because I heard one of the people say, we'll give him 3 weeks and then we're done. I know we're not going to be able to trust him. And I brought him in, and Corey, without script, went into the room and shared with people how important his changing was for them, and focused on them, and focused on having gotten feedback from people and thanked them for giving the feedback that he had gotten. And he said, please give me more than 3 weeks. I've had some insights, and I really want to be able to practice with all of you because you're so important. So with honesty, he tried to build trust. He was transparent. He focused on the relationships with the people, standing under the reality and acknowledging that he hadn't done a good job and why he was changing. And believe it or not, he spent years after that working with the company, contributing and being part of the team. So these are rituals. They're conversational rituals that you can practice that may say, oh, how could that work? Give it a try. When you come from your heart and you speak the truth, people are going to feel it, especially with people that are close. And they'll feel the shift, and then something will change.
Judith Glaser.
Yeah.
Judith, thank you so much.